The kingdom of Arendelle lay in the heart of a green valley, surrounded by snow-capped mountains and wide rivers that shone like silver under the sun. It was a peaceful land known for its gentle people and fair queen. Queen Marianne had ruled for 20 years with wisdom and care. The people loved her deeply, not only because she was kind, but because she truly listened to the troubles of even the poorest farmers. Yet in the grand palace of marble and gold, the queen's heart carried a heavy sadness that time had never healed. Many years ago, she had a daughter, Princess Leora. The child had been her pride and joy. Leora had golden hair and eyes, the color of the summer sky. From a young age, she showed both gentleness and courage. She often ran barefoot through the palace gardens, talking to the birds or helping the gardeners plant new flowers. The people of Arendelle adored her because she was not distant or proud, even though she was royal. But just before her 18th birthday, the night before she was to be crowned as the future ruler, Leora disappeared. No one knew how. The palace guards were found asleep, though they swore they had been awake all night. Her room was empty except for the crown she was meant to wear. A window stood open, the curtains blowing softly in the morning wind. No note, no clue, only silence. At first, everyone believed she might have been taken by enemies or kidnapped by those who envied the queen. The royal guards searched every road, every wood and riverbank. Messengers rode across distant lands. The queen herself offered gold and titles to anyone who could bring her child home. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. No one found Leora. The queen grew older, and though she never showed her pain before her people, her eyes carried sorrow each time the sun rose. At night, she often stood on the balcony of her tower, looking at the stars. Servants sometimes heard her whisper to the wind, asking it to watch over her daughter wherever she might be. The people of Arendelle continued to live and work. Markets opened, festivals were held, and life went on as it must. But the story of the missing princess became a part of every song and tale told near the fires at night. Children who had never seen her still dreamed of finding her one day. Some travelers claimed they saw a young woman in far lands who looked like Leora, but none of those stories could be proven. Years passed and the queen's hair turned as white as winter snow. She ruled with the same fairness, but her loneliness remained hidden beneath her calm face. Her counselors often suggested that the throne should have a new heir, but the queen refused. She said that until she saw her daughter's crown placed on another's head, the throne would keep waiting. There were nights when storms howled over the valley and the queen would wake from sleep, her heart pounding from dreams of Leora calling her name. At those times she walked barefoot through the empty halls of the palace, remembering how her daughter used to laugh in those same halls. The guards looked away respectfully, for they understood that some griefs never fade. One evening in late autumn, when golden leaves covered the palace gardens, the queen sat alone by her window. She held Leora's childhood ribbon in her hand, the last thing left behind by the vanished princess. The ribbon was soft and faded, smelling faintly of lavender. It reminded the queen of happier days when her daughter would stand behind her mirror, combing her hair and talking cheerfully about the future. Outside, the kingdom seemed calm, but whispers ran through the villages. Some believed that the princess had run away because Palace's life was too strict. Others said she had fallen in love with a common man and chosen to live as one of them. Yet none could say for sure. Only the queen's faith remained unbroken. She still believed her daughter was alive somewhere, waiting for the right time to return. That faith became her strength. Whenever people came to her court seeking help or comfort, she gave it freely and told them, even when all seems lost, never stop believing that light will find its way back. Those who knew her best understood that she spoke as much to herself as to them. In the quiet of the palace, the queen's hope glowed like a small candle that refused to die out. Though the years had stolen much from her, she waited with a strange peace in her heart. For deep inside, Mother Slove told her what the world would not believe: her daughter of Arendelle would one day come home. Far away from the grand palace of Arendelle, over the wide rivers and beyond the tall hills, there was a small village called Thistlebrook. It was a quiet place filled with good-hearted people who worked hard in their fields and sang cheerful songs at the end of the day. In this small village lived a woman named Leah. No one in the village knew that. Leah was once the lost Princess Leora of Arendelle. She had changed her name the day she left her old life behind. Leah's home was simple but warm. It stood near the edge of the forest, surrounded by apple trees and a small garden full of herbs and flowers. She lived there with her husband Daniel and their 2 children, Eli and Clara. The house was filled with laughter, and the smell of fresh bread often drifted from the kitchen window. Leah had built a life far away from the golden halls of the palace, but in her heart she sometimes thought of her mother, Queen Marianne, and the life she had left behind. Daniel was a kind and humble craftsman. He made wooden toys, chairs, and tools. His hands were strong and rough, but his heart was gentle. He had helped Leah one rainy evening many years ago, when she had first arrived in the village with nothing but a torn cloak and no place to go. She had not told him who she really was. All she said was that she was running from a life that no longer felt like hers. Daniel had smiled and offered her a place to rest. From that small kindness, love had quietly begun to grow between them. The people of Thistlebrook welcomed Leah as one of their own. She worked beside them in the fields, cared for the children, and helped anyone in need. Her calm voice and kind eyes made everyone trust her. Over time, she no longer felt like a princess hiding among common people. She simply felt like a woman who had finally found the peace she had always longed for. Eli and Clara were the light of her life. They were twins, full of energy and curiosity. Eli loved climbing trees, often returning home with dirty hands and a wide grin. Clara loved to read and spent long hours sitting by the fire, her face half hidden behind the village's old storybooks. Leah told them tales of kings, queens, and brave heroes, but she never said that she had once lived in a real palace. To them, she was only their mother, and that was enough. On quiet nights when the children were asleep, Leah and Daniel often sat on the porch together watching fireflies glow over the fields. Daniel would speak of the village's future, while Leah listened, thinking of her past. Sometimes Daniel noticed the faraway look in her eyes and asked if something was troubling her. She always smiled and said, "It is only the wind bringing old memories." Yet no matter how happy and peaceful her life had become, there were times when Leah's heart ached. Sometimes, when she looked at her children, she thought of the mother she had left behind in Arendelle. She wondered if Queen Marianne ever forgave her for running away. She had been so young then, filled with confusion and longing for freedom. The palace had felt like a golden cage. Everyone had watched her every move, and her life had seemed written by others before she could write it herself. Here in Thistlebrook, she had freedom. She could walk in the rain without guards following her. She could laugh without fear of judgment. She had learned how to live like ordinary people, growing food, sewing clothes, and being a wife and mother. But she knew that she could never escape who she truly was. Each time she looked at the mountains beyond the valley, she thought of the kingdom that lay on the other side. One afternoon, while the sun was setting and the sky turned red and gold, Leah stood by the orchard, watching her children chase each other through the grass. Daniel was working near the old barn, carving a wooden toy horse for Clara. The peaceful sight brought a soft smile to Leah's face, and for a moment she believed her new world would last forever. But far away, in the royal palace she had once called home, something was beginning to stir. Messengers were traveling through distant lands, carrying word that the queen's strength was fading and that Arendelle needed an heir. Leah did not yet know that her quiet life in Thistlebrook was about to change forever. The road of destiny was turning back toward her, even as she stood among her apple trees, unaware that her hidden past was reaching out to claim her once more. In the kingdom of Arendelle, time had brought both peace and quiet worry. The fields still bloomed, the people still sang, but the air inside the palace grew heavy with unease. Queen Marianne, now older and frailer, ruled with the same steady heart as always, but her strength was fading. She often sat by the tall windows of her study, her hands resting on the edge of her chair, staring toward the eastern hills where the sun rose each morning. Many in the court feared what would happen when she could no longer rule. The queen's advisors began to whisper among themselves. They spoke in careful tones, but the walls of the palace carried their words. "There must be an heir," one said, "or the throne will fall into the hands of the greedy." Another warned, "The neighboring Lord of Braemont is watching. Without a clear heir, he may claim Arendelle as his own." The queen listened, but did not answer. She had spent years hoping her daughter would return, and deep down she still believed that hope was not foolish. News from the borders of the kingdom grew troubling. Lord Cassian of Braemont, a sharp and power-hungry man, began gathering armies along his lands. His messengers spoke proudly of his growing influence. "The queen has no heir," they said. "Narindo would be stronger under new leadership." The rumor spread like wildfire. In the markets, in the taverns, and even in quiet homes, people began to wonder if the golden age of Marianne's rule was coming to an end. In the palace, her faithful advisor, Sir Henry, tried to comfort her. He was an old knight, loyal since her youth. One evening, as the queen sat by her table reading a letter from her council, he said, "Your Majesty, the court is restless. They say the time has come to choose a new successor." The queen looked up slowly. "There is only one successor," she said softly. "My daughter, she lives, Henry. I feel it. My heart has never been wrong about her." Sir Henry bowed his head but said nothing more. He had also loved the princess in his own fatherly way. He wished she truly was alive, but 20 years was a long time to believe in a ghost. Far from the palace in the village of Thistlebrook, the calm days continued for Leia and her family. As autumn arrived, the air carried the scent of apples and rain. The villagers prepared for the harvest festival, the happiest time of the year. Daniel fixed up the old wooden stage by the river for dancing. Liet helped decorate the square with ribbons and flowers. Liet and Clara were excited to see the lanterns that would light the night sky. When the festival began, music filled the air. People danced, laughed, and shared food. Leah sang softly with the women, while Daniel played his carved flute. For a while, everything seemed perfect. But as the night grew darker, a group of travelers arrived at the edge of the village. They were dressed in cloaks marked with the royal crest of Arendelle. The villagers turned to whisper. Royal messengers did not often visit such quiet places. The leader of the group, a tall man with tired eyes, stepped into the crowd and called out, "We come in service of Queen Marianne of Arendelle. We seek news of a woman long missing from her home." When Leah heard the name of the queen, her heart trembled. She stood very still, her smile fading from her face. The messenger read from a letter he carried. "The queen grows weak. The throne must be secured. A reward awaits anyone with knowledge of the lost princess, Leora of Arendelle." Gasps spread through the crowd. Many villagers glanced at Leia, for though they had never known her past, her gentle beauty and graceful nature had always seemed unusual. Daniel noticed how pale she had turned. He took her hand gently. "Leia, are you all right?" he whispered, but she could not answer. In her mind, memories poured back the night she had fled the palace, the lights fading behind her as she rode into the dark forest, the sound of her mother's voice calling her name. Later that night, after the travelers had gone to rest, Leah sat awake while the others slept. The moon shone through the window, silver and quiet. Daniel woke and found her sitting by the window, tears on her cheeks. He knelt beside her and said softly, "Tell me what troubles you, please." Leah turned to him and spoke the truth she had hidden for years. She told him who she really was, where she came from, and why she had run away. Daniel listened without anger. When she had finished, he held her hands and said, "You are my wife and the mother of our children. Whatever you were before, it changes nothing for me. But for Leia, everything had changed." The world she had escaped from was calling her back. She looked at her sleeping children and felt torn between the life she loved and the duty she could no longer deny. Somewhere beyond the horizon, her mother was waiting, and the winds of Arendelle were whispering her name once more. The next morning, the air in Thistlebrook was quiet and cool. Mist hung over the fields, and the sound of roosters echoed through the valley. Leia was already awake, standing at the doorway of her little home. She held her mother's old ribbon in her hand, the one she had carried all these years, reminded her of the life she had left far behind. Daniel joined her quietly. He looked at her with a mixture of love and worry. "You mean to go with them, don't you?" he asked gently. Leah nodded. "Yes. I cannot hide any longer. Right. My mother needs me. I feel it." Daniel took a deep breath, but did not argue. "Then we will go with you," he said. She looked at him in surprise. "You and the children should stay here where it is safe." But Daniel shook his head. If you must face your past, then we face it together. Eli and Clara deserve to know who they are. And you deserve not to go alone. His voice was firm, and she knew there would be no changing his mind. Later that day, the royal messengers returned to the village, their horses resting near the stream. The leader bowed when he saw Leah waiting for them. To his surprise, she did not hide or hesitate. She stepped forward calmly, her children by her side and Daniel standing slightly behind her. "I am the one you seek," Leah said. "I am Leora of Arendelle." The men looked at each other in disbelief. One of them dropped to his knee and lowered his head. "Your Highness, the Queen still lives. She has never stopped searching for you." A deep ache filled Leah's chest. "Then take me to her," she said softly. With that, their journey began. They traveled for many days along winding roads and through deep forests. The children found the journey exciting, often pointing at birds or streams as they passed. Daniel kept the mood light with gentle stories, but Leah often fell silent. Every bend in the road brought her closer to the home she had left behind. At last, after many sunsets, the hills of Arendelle rose into view. The sight made her catch her breath. The golden towers of the palace shone faintly in the distance. Villagers along the road bowed as the royal group passed, unaware that the humble woman in the carriage was their long-lost princess. When they reached the palace gate, the guards straightened in shock. None of them had seen her for 20 years, yet many recognized her face. Whispers swept through the courtyard as the carriage rolled inside. Servants hurried about, uncertain if they should weep or cheer. Leah stepped down from the carriage slowly, still holding the hands of her children. Daniel remained close behind. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the grand courtyard. The doors of the palace opened wide, and there stood Queen Marianne, graceful but frail, dressed in simple royal garments. Her eyes widened as she saw her daughter for the first time after long years of pain. Mother and daughter froze for a moment, neither daring to breathe. Then the queen whispered Leora. That one word broke the years of silence. Leah rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. Queen Marianne opened her arms and they held each other tightly. The queen wept not as a ruler, but as a mother whose lost child had finally returned home. Those who watched felt their own hearts tremble. When the queen looked up, her eyes fell on the two children standing beside her daughter. "And who are these little ones?" she asked softly. "My children," Leah answered. "Eli and Clara." The queen looked at them with warmth and wonder. "Then I have grandchildren," she said, her voice trembling with joy. She knelt and took their small hands. Eli smiled shyly, and Clara curtsied, just like she had seen in her mother's stories. The queen laughed through her tears. Later, the palace filled with light and music. Word spread quickly that the lost princess had returned. The people of Arendelle filled the streets with flowers and candles. Even the knights who had grown old waiting for their princess stood proudly once more. But not everyone was pleased. In the corners of the royal court, some nobles whispered that Leah's years among common people made her unfit to rule. Others worried about her husband, a man with no noble blood. The queen heard these whispers but paid them no mind. She was too full of happiness to care about politics. That evening, the queen and her daughter dined together for the first time in decades. They spoke softly, sharing stories. Leah told her mother about life in the village, about Daniel's kindness, and the laughter of their children. When she finished, the queen reached across the table and took her hand. "You have returned not as the child who left, but as a woman who understands what true strength means," she said. Leah smiled, though tears glimmered in her eyes. Outside the palace, the bells of Arendelle rang through the night. After many long and lonely years, the queen's missing daughter had come home. Holding the hands of her two children, ready to begin a new chapter that would change the kingdom forever. Morning light touched the towers of the royal palace as Arendelle awoke to its most hopeful day in many years. The lost princess had returned home, and joy had spread through every street and home. Bells rang through the valley, soldiers smiled at strangers, and children carried ribbons in the colors of the royal house. For the first time in a long while, laughter echoed again inside the palace walls. Queen Marianne stood looking out from her balcony. Tears still shone in her eyes, but her face was calm and full of life again. For 20 years she had waited for this moment, and now her heart was finally at peace. Down in the royal garden, Leah walked hand in hand with her children while Daniel followed close behind. The flowers were brighter than she remembered, and the air smelled sweet after a light rain. Eli and Clara ran across the path, amazed by the fountains and marble statues. They had never seen such grand beauty before. Servants and guards greeted them respectfully, though many still looked at Daniel with a mix of curiosity and doubt. He was not a nobleman, and his simple clothes looked strange among the gold and silk of the palace. But Leah didn't care. To her, he was worth more than any jewel or title. Later that morning, the queen called a meeting in the throne hall. The nobles gathered, their jeweled coats shining under the chandeliers. The queen entered first, leaning lightly on her cane but walking with dignity. Beside her came Leah, dressed in a plain but beautiful gown the queen had once kept for her. At Leah's side stood Daniel, and behind them their two children waited silently, their eyes wide and respectful. The queen raised her hand for quiet. "My people," she said in a calm voice that carried through the hall. "Years ago I lost my daughter, and Arendelle lost its princess. That loss has haunted us since. Today that pain ends. The princess has returned at last." A wave of noise rose from the crowd, cheers, whispers, and even disbelief. The queen's eyes shone with firm pride. "See before you not only your princess, but also the new hope of this kingdom," she continued. "Leora, once lost to me, has come home with a family that shows what true love and courage mean." Some of the nobles shifted uneasily. One of them, Lord Cedric, a proud man with a sharp face, stepped forward and bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "forgive my question, but the princess has lived far from the court for many years. She married outside noble blood. Will the people of Arendelle accept her as their heir?" The queen's expression did not change. "Your blood and birth may write history," she said, "but kindness and wisdom shape the future. My daughter's heart is true, and that is what this kingdom needs. The people love her already because they see in her the same light they once saw in me." Then she turned to Leah and took her hand. "From this day forward, I name you my heir and your children after you. Together we will guide Arendelle into a new dawn." Cheers rose from nearly every corner of the hall. Many who had doubted were moved by the queen's strength and warmth. Eli and Clara hugged their mother, while Daniel stood quietly, pride shining in his eyes. Leah bowed her head to the queen. "I left long ago in search of who I was," she said softly.
"Oh.
"Now I understand that my heart belongs to both the crown and the people. I will honor that for as long as I live." What followed were days of celebration. Farmers from the far fields brought gifts of grain and fruit, and musicians played late into the night in every square. Children sang songs about the princess who had lived among the people and come home again. Even the stern nobles softened when they saw how deeply the people adored Leah. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Leah and her mother walked in the garden alone. The queen looked at her daughter, her voice tender. "All those years I thought the world had taken you from me, but it was only preparing you to return a stronger woman." Leah smiled and squeezed her mother's hand. "And you waited even when hope was hard to hold. That is strength I can only hope to learn." The queen laughed softly. "You already have." Nearby, Daniel played with their children near the fountain, their laughter floating over the sound of running water. Leah watched them with quiet love. "They will grow here, with both the crown and the people close at heart," she said. The queen nodded. "They are the future of Arendelle, one born of unity, not pride." As night fell, lanterns were lit all across the land. The palace glowed in warm light, and distant bells sounded again. The story of sorrow had turned into a story of hope. The queen's missing daughter had returned, not as a frightened girl, but as a woman and a mother who carried the best of both worlds within her. The people of Arendelle would remember the day forever. It was the day the lost princess came home holding the small hands that would carry the kingdom, slight into its next golden age.